application of them that results in a lot less efficiencies than people thought they would get. Okay, so Agile models. Now, Agile can be thought of as a form of iterative, but I think it's worth addressing it on its own because it has its own particular challenges, potentially above and beyond what might come from any other iterative approach. And I want to point out something. Just like there's incremental models as they are theoretically conceived to be, and incremental models as they are actually practiced. We see a lot of that with our clients that are using Agile too. There are fairly clearly defined rules about what you're supposed to do if you're following an Agile lifecycle model, and a lot of controls in it to try to keep it pointed in the right direction. But what we see in actual practice with a lot of our clients is that they pick the parts of Agile that they like, they drop the parts of Agile that they don't like, and they still call it Agile. So what I'm referring to here in terms of the challenges are Agile as we actually see it practiced by our clients around the world, not Agile as it exists in some rarefied, theoretical existence or in the training course, right? You can go out to agilemanifesto.org and read how it's supposed to be, but then when you get down to people using it on projects, you find that it's often not that way. So in Agile as actually practiced, one of the things that we see a lot of is this issue of the sprint silos. So a lot of our clients are using Scrum, and in Scrum the iterations are sprints, and what happens is that these sprint teams are supposed to be these self-directing teams, which sounds good. It's like, oh, you're going to empower the people at the line level, and it has this sort of total quality management sound to it, right? Anybody can stop the assembly line, and it kind of seems like it'd be a good way to go. And it does have its advantages, but one of the problems can be that the testers are 100% allocated to these sprint teams, and there is no mechanism for getting a good cross-functional view of what's going on. Then the testing organization's ability to bring that awareness of all of the different things that are going on across all of the different applications goes away. And for a lot of our clients, that's one of the things they really like about having a centralized test team, that there's one group out there that actually has their hands on everything, and they know how everything works together. So it's very easy in an Agile world for the system integration testing and the interoperability testing to really suffer if there's not an active organizational scheme, I guess you could say, approach to making sure that doesn't happen. We have seen with some of our clients, again, long hours due to overcommitment. Now, Agile purists will jump up and down and say, well, that's not Agile, that's not Agile. People are supposed to be triaging features out of one sprint into the next sprint if they're not getting their, what they call the velocity that they are supposed to have. But what we found is that simply adopting a lifecycle model, no matter what that model is, Agile or not, does not change the fundamental human tendency to want more than what they're actually willing to pay for. And that's the driver of overcommitment. And sure, the teams are supposed to be self-directed, but what we found is that there are limits on that self-direction with a lot of our clients. And when the teams start saying, well, we're going to have to slip these features out into the next sprint, business stakeholders start screaming. And just saying to a business stakeholder, well, that's going to have to slip because that's the way Agile works. That Agile is not a magic bullet. You're not going to be able to just shoot the stakeholder with the Agile word and they'll go, oh, okay, and then it goes away. It just doesn't happen that way in what we've seen. So we have still seen a lot of problems with overcommitment that really impacts the test team because you get these interior dates slipping, but the sprint dates are held, right? So they have these like 4-week sprints, absolutely have to be done with the sprint at the end of 4 weeks. but there's no business driver attached to that, right? It's an arbitrary number, right? 4 weeks is arbitrary. It could be 5 weeks, it could be 3 weeks, right? So you have the poor testers getting pulled into this total fire drill crisis type of situation at the end of every 4-week sprint for no reason other than basically worshiping this arbitrary date that's been set up by the sprint cycles, which is even more damaging of morale because it's hard to justify it, right? I mean, what do you tell your spouse? No, I can't go to the kid's birthday party this weekend because it's the end of a sprint. You know, I mean, you can say, well, you know, we've got this big project and there's $1 million or $10 million or $50 million riding on it. That kind of makes sense, but you know, it's the 4th week of the cycle, and so we have to have this big fire drill. It's kind of not very compelling. We do see with some of our clients late involvement of the test team, though that does tend to be less with the Agile models. That's one of the benefits of the silos, that at least people are dedicated. But if you try to solve the silo problem by moving people around from one sprint to another as the testing starts up, then you just create another problem. So you can't solve it organizationally that way. You have to solve it through greater staffing, basically. One of the problems that we see with Agile that has to be thought about and solved is you need to take the time to invest in long-term test process improvements. It's very difficult in some of these Agile teams that we've seen because everything is focused on getting something that's client-ready at the end of the sprint, and that's, you know, everybody's looking at that as the goal, not thinking about, well, how do we improve our process over time, particularly the test process. So organizationally, you got to plan for that. And you also have to help people understand that testing is a specialized role. One of the things that's happened in some schools of Agile approaches is to say, well, everybody's on the team, you know, as if everybody were interchangeable on the team. So, you know, use whatever metaphor you want to try to explain why that doesn't work. I mean, one of the more obvious ones is, say, a sports metaphor, right? I mean, just because everybody's on a team doesn't mean everybody plays the same position, right? And you've got testers that are specialized as testers. They're bringing particular skills to bear. Okay, system integration is another life cycle, if you will, where we're taking components that have been built often by outside teams and assembling them together, right? Now, that may be outside, like outside of the organization, or it could be outside, like separate teams within the same company, but, you know, distributed in some way. So some of the things that you have to deal with here organizationally is getting visibility into the testing of the components before they get to you. If stuff just comes flying over the wall and you have no idea what shape it's in, then that makes it very difficult to plan, right? And thus, you know, how you organize yourself to deal with that is very challenging. Because the components are often created by different groups, there can be political issues that arise if there are a large number of problems discovered in a particular component. It can create some dynamics that are difficult to deal with. So you want to make sure that you sensitize people to this fact